Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to All Era Sports with Sirhan as I come to you live on this frigid day in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America, on this 27th of January, 2026. For the second straight day, for everybody here in the city of Cincinnati or any place that's been hit by the cold weather, do take safe and precautionary measures, especially in the streets where it's supposed to not be the greatest still. Some areas have improved, but do take precautionary measures. It's vital you guys go from point A to point B and back safe if you guys have to travel on the roads. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. Lots to get to, including the shocking news that broke in the NFL. Also reliving the two words wide right and wide still famous to this day. And a bloodbath in Puerto Rico that saw an all-time great go to the well and elevate himself in history. But let's start with the big news that just broke about an hour ago in the NFL. And there is a lot to get to with this. It is the announcement that Bill Belichick didn't get the votes to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I had to read this 20 times. I had to hear this about another 10 times to make sure there was nothing fabricated about it or there was nothing AI or anything like it. And everybody credible in the NFL wants answers. We all do, including myself, who has been in the NFL community for a while. I don't have a vote, but my vote would have gone to him. It's a no-brainer. Question is, what's the criteria for such a thing to take place like this? When you have the resume that he has, going back to his days as a defensive coordinator with the New York Giants under the great Bill Parcells. I mean, he won 2 Super Bowl rings there with Parcells in New York. And we know his tenure in New England. Yes, there was the whatever he did in 2007 that he was caught with. I get it. But does that really deter the fact the guy belongs in the Hall of Fame on the even on the first ballot? Question is, who were the guys that voted no? And those guys better come out and give a legit, honest answer as to why they voted the way they did. Because otherwise, it's going to look embarrassingly and cowardly bad for them individually and for the voters committee collectively, whose ever idea was to do this. And if you're trying to say you're using this against them to not put them in the first ballot, it's a despicable act of petty cowardice you can have in this walk of life to deter somebody who was worthy of a first ballot Hall of Fame appearance. And because of it, that's why we had what we had at the end of the day. And because of it, that's why we had this result, simply because somebody has a personal agenda. I think I might know who that is. I'll touch on that here in a second. But we do have somebody with a personal agenda. And because of that personal agenda, we had this. I mean, every credible person in the NFL, even the ones that aren't credible by mainstream standards, said, am I reading this correctly? Yes, you read it correctly. Yes, you heard it correctly. Bill Belichick is not in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot when everything was there. I mean, what was the guy supposed to do? Go undefeated every season? I mean, you're still going to hold it against him at this rate. You guys holding Super Bowl 42 against them? They're losing the Super Bowl 42 to the Eli Manning-led New York Giants? I mean, come on. Even with this whole scenario that took place in 2007 for whatever they did, his Hall of Fame credentials were wrapped before then. First as an assistant, and then as a defensive coordinator with the Giants under Bill Parcells when they won 2 titles in 86 and 90. And then the first 3 Super Bowl run in 2001, 3, and 4 in New England as a head coach. And of course, a lot of success under Parcells. It was good but not great in Cleveland, but it didn't help that Art Modell did what he did, and it set Bill Belichick up for failure. And we're going to have another controversy in the same thing that likely Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, is going into the Hall of Fame. And the owners want all the credit because of their narcissism and their cowardice. And the guy I'm going to talk about next is one that spearheaded all of this because that fits him perfectly. That is a one-time Bills and Colts GM, Bill Polian. It was revealed that he was the one that pushed to have it put away, not put him on the first ballot because, he has it against him. Problem is, when he was an owner and a general manager or whatever title he had, he was an underachiever and couldn't accept it. And so he had to take it out on this. And it's simply because Bill Polian was simply an underachiever in the NFL in his position, and a bad one too, because he had elite teams in Buffalo and Indy, but couldn't get over the hump. And there's a reason for it, and he won't explain the reason for it. That's part one. Part two, maybe could it be because the Indianapolis Colts he put together, led by Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison, and Reggie Wayne, underachieved by getting only one Super Bowl, and that came in a disgustingly played game against Rex Grossman and the Chicago Bears. And the Super Bowl was basically the equivalent of masking an underachieving run they had in Indy. And the fact that the key piece that knocked them out for many of those years in the beginning were Bill Belichick's New England Patriots. And not to mention, he put together those Buffalo teams over there, and they underachieved, and we know why. And maybe Bill Polian is still this bitter, washed-up hack who has pettiness and has a bit of an anger inside his human body that he felt the need to pull it out and reveal himself. And because of it, that's why we had what we had today. And it came out that he was the one that spearheaded all of this because he had the sick obsession of wanting Robert Kraft to have the credit when everybody knows Robert Kraft didn't want any of this. I mean, the guys that driven this were Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. We all know that. And so what's going to happen next year? Are they going to hold this against Tom Brady when his ballot is up in 27 and he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer? Are they going to do the same thing with him? Because you do it then all credibility is out the window. And it is bad. I mean, that's what we're headed toward in the NFL right now. And when I talked about Hall of Fame processes when I deal with basketball and boxing, I thought, of course, they're skewered. No, we're talking about the Pro Football Hall of Fame process as real skewered. And boy, did it show itself today. With this announcement having probably, arguably, the greatest coach in NFL history not be on the first ballot. And the three guys, the coaches that were on the first ballot, Tom Landry, Chuck Noll, and Don Shula. And you could probably make an argument. I'm not saying, again, I don't have, not my argument, just a general argument. I don't know what the criteria is. Let me preface that again. An argument could be made Belichick was greater than all three because of his career accolades and his record. I get it. I mean, I'm not saying those three weren't deserving. I mean, they were. It's a no-brainer. I mean, talking about a Mount Rushmore right there. We talk about Landry, Noll, and Shula. Bill Belichick's on there. And for this to happen today, to arguably one of the most winningest coaches, and not just in NFL history, but all professional team sports history, it's just it's a crying shame. And now, what's going to happen next year if Tom Brady's on the first ballot? And if you're going to hold that against Bill Belichick, are you going to hold it against Tom Brady? And that's where we're going to have a major problem next year if that goes, because of the same thing. If you do put him in over Bill Belichick, you just showed your hypocrisy. And if you're going to push Bill Belichick out because of it, and you push Tom Brady out of it, you're really showing your cowardice. A massive can of worms has just been opened in the NFL Hall of Fame process today, and it's going to have a same effect next year when Tom Brady's name is up, and if they're going to use that against him or not, regardless of what happens, the NFL just Hall of Fame process just opened a can of worms, and the 10 voters who voted no for this need to reveal themselves, show the whole world why. Don't hide behind a fake vote. Don't carry yourself like a coward. Show yourself, explain yourself, because you made the choice to not put one of the premier coaches in the Hall of Fame the first chance you got. And you better have an honest and legit explanation for it, because you're going to look real bad if you don't. Actually, you look real bad anyways, and if you don't, you're going to look worse, because today was just a terrible day for an NFL voter, and those voters should have their privileges revoked forever if they don't explain why, and explain why honestly. Keyword being honestly, because I'm not expecting them to explain it. And if they do, they would deliver fabricated garbage via chat GPT, which is how it is today. And it's just a walking embarrassment what took place today in the NFL. And everybody feeling the NFL voting process should be ashamed of themselves. It's a total act of despicable and disgraceful cowardice that took place with us. What's going to happen next year? I mean, if you put Tom Brady in the first ballot and still not Bill Belichick, you're really a hypocrite. And if you push Tom Brady aside the same way you did with Bill Belichick because of what took place in 2007, you're really opening a can of worms, because there's a couple guys in there that are already in there. What are you going to do now? What an embarrassment. And every top name in the NFL came out and said, what a joke. And calling this day a joke is actually being too nice, because that's what it was. Because we have some old heads in that NFL voters committee who are bitter and hold unnecessary grudges. Most notably, the biggest coward of them all, Bill Polian, who was an underachiever in the NFL. And because of it, that's why we had what we had. Sometimes you got to learn how to take losses like men. Apparently, Bill Polian still can't take losses like men. That's why he did what he did today. And there's no doubt about it. And what's about to happen over the next few years in the NFL voters polls when it comes to who's on the ballot or not, it's going to be under a massive microscope now, and it's going to be well-deserved. Because now, hypocrisy just showed itself in the worst way possible. And I had to deal with it with the boxing and basketball Hall of Fame voters and the Hall of Fame processes with those sports. Now we're dealing with the same thing with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. They're supposed to be the most consistent of the bunch, but they're not. And we're having this conversation once again. Unreal. If you want to hold what the Patriots had against them in 2007 against them, that's fine. No one's saying don't hold it against them. Is it the overall feel of what the Patriots did? No, because they were still winning. I mean, I said this all along during that whole Patriots run. This is a crack when it comes to, we talk about the Belichick-Brady era. These are the same guys who say in one sentence that they had a cheating scandal to get wins, but also in that same sentence says the NFL helps them out. I always said Patriots haters, and I'm not a Patriots fan myself, I'll put it right there. Patriots haters are the biggest two-faced hypocrites during that run, and they showed again in this Hall of Fame vote, because now they're coming out of the woodworks again with their cowardice, simply because they can't stay on one way and maintain it. They feel the need to turn around and go the wrong way on a one-way street. And when that happens, you get a mess. And that's what we had today. Belichick is going to eventually be in the Hall of Fame. If he's not, then we'll have another discussion. But the boat was missed. And not the fact it was missed. It was how it was missed. Because how old heads can't take losses like men many years later, especially the character of Bill Polian, who underachieved in the NFL during his 10 years of Buffalo and Indianapolis, and so did those two teams. And that's why he had this grudge today. And this was the result. Plain and simple. With those teams, you guys should have been winning more Super Bowls. Why you didn't in Buffalo and Indy requires an explanation, and Bill Polian never explained why. Just resorted to this in the biggest form of cowardice you could ever come across. Plain and simple. More about Bill Polian. Look, he said he was one of the better, brilliant minds. He put together decent rosters. I'll give him that in his time. Underachieved. It's plain and simple. Underachieved. He only got a combined one Super Bowl out of it. And look at the teams he had over there in Buffalo and Indy. He underachieved. And part of it, when he underachieved in Indy, was because of the New England Patriots. I mean, you can say what you want, but he underachieved. So too did Peyton Manning at that time. But Peyton Manning was in a minute. I mean, explain that to me. Bill Polian, when he was an exec, he was he was a solid mind. Actually, did some analyst work for ESPN, which I thought he was good, but not great. But when you do this, after what happened in your career, years later, and still hold it as a grudge against whomever you feel like to hold a grudge against, it makes you look bitter, it makes you look petty, and it makes you a coward. And today, for a guy who was supposed to have one of the more credible names in the NFL fraternity, the Bill Polian, for him to do this, whatever credibility he had left, it's done. It's done, and it's done for good. Because you're going to hold this over their heads because you underachieved, and that's what Bill Polian did. He underachieved. You can expect backlash and strong backlash because your credibility just opened the drain and just went down it. What if he has anything left, which I don't think he does now? He had little because of how he underachieved as a football mind in Indiana and Buffalo. And this just makes it worse. At some point, some of you guys older than myself, and I'll put this out there, I'm 48. Some of you guys older than myself need to shut up and let things go. And we're going to make a vote like that. Quit putting personal bias involved because you underachieve like Bill Polian did. Because if you don't, it's going to look real bad on you in the end. And if this is going to be Bill Polian's last legacy before he goes away, which I expect him to probably go away here soon, hopefully, not the way to go out. It's just a sad, sad day for him and a terrible day overall for the NFL. Yes, Belichick carried himself like a pompous jerk to the media, which, it is what it is. I mean, he's not the first one to do it, and he certainly wouldn't be the last one to do it. But does carrying yourself like a jerk to the media disqualify you from being in the Hall of Fame? And if that does, we have some people in the media who are just born cowards that need to just get out. Flat out get out. Because Bill Belichick doesn't have to carry himself like the model citizen or the jolly old man with the hoodie all the time, because his job was to coach the New England Patriots. That's what it was. I mean, he's going to be short and to the point. And yes, at times he carried himself like a jerk. I agree. But does carrying yourself as a jerk through the media overtake the overall big picture success of what a coach did for almost 20 years and have the success that he had? And if you're holding that against him, it says more about you than it does Bill Belichick. There's another problem, and the grudges need to end. Plain and simple. Yes, the tenure of Belichick in New England in the last few years after Tom Brady left wasn't great. We get it. But Tom Brady left, and the Patriots roster was just a total mess. And basically, Robert Kraft told Bill Belichick to clean it up, and Belichick had nothing to work with. But when you look at the overall big picture of what took place today, lots of grudges were held, lots of pettiness was exposed, and lots of spineless cowardice was shown, and the NFL lost today because of it. I mean, everyone's still asking, is it AI? Is it legit? It is. I had to read it 10 times. I had to hear it 10 different times. How can you go through with it? How can you be okay with it? And I'm still wondering who is okay with it and why they're okay with it. There are some questions that have to be honestly answered. And if they're not going to answer them, they might as well just leave, because it might be time to put some real people in there who know what they're doing. Case closed. I'll probably be talking more about that this next year, because as I said, what's going to happen next year is Tom Brady's going to be on the ballot. And are you going to hold this against Tom Brady the same way you did with Bill Belichick? Because if you do, we have a real problem. But if you put Tom Brady in on the first ballot and not put Bill Belichick on the first ballot, you're a hypocrite, and that's a problem. I'll be talking about that next year. On to other news in the NFL. As I predicted the other night that Joe Brady was going to be the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, promoted from offensive coordinator. And they were talking about wanting Clint Kubiak, but of course he's offensive coordinator in Seattle. League rules prohibit Buffalo from doing that. That was their number one choice. And Kubiak would have gone to Buffalo in a minute because it was an attractive job with Josh Allen and all them guys. But this was a no-brainer. I mean, he knows he knows Josh Allen and vice versa, so not much is going to change out of that. Interesting that they're now looking for a defensive coordinator, and they're talking about Jim Leonard from the Denver Broncos to foot that spot. Leonard was a solid secondary guy, especially in his years with the Baltimore Ravens, who I think would help them because that defense needs a lot of help right now. But the move to hire Brady was expected, maybe in hindsight. When they interviewed and they went outside the box and they couldn't find what they wanted, they decided to take this route. But here's an interesting thing. I come up with this. Back at the postseason, or should I say, the off-season presser that Terry Pegula and Brandon Beane had when they hired, or back up, the after-season presser of both Terry Pegula and Brandon Beane, where they talked about, how the staff pushed for Keon Coleman, and it seemed like it was targeted. One of them was targeted toward Joe Brady, who was the offensive coordinator at the time. And now they hire the guy who they criticized for drafting Keon Coleman, and now you just created a whole new dilemma, a real whole new dilemma. Why? Because you just threw Keon Coleman under the bus and pinned it on the coaching staff, which was the guy who fired Sean McDermott, and a part of that staff was offensive coordinator Joe Brady, and now you promote Brady to head coach, and you promote Brandon Beane to a higher role other than general manager. You just made yourself look like a bona fide hypocrite today with this move, given everything at that postseason presser if you're Terry Pegula and Brandon Beane. Because that whole presser was just an embarrassment. It all it likely means is that Keon Coleman is probably not happy right now. And I wouldn't blame him. If I'm him, I'm not even going anywhere near the city of Buffalo ever again after this. I'm not even touching it. Because that's a bigger embarrassment out of all of this. Congratulations. I mean, this was the expected hire. I mean, he and Josh Allen worked together well in a couple years as the coordinator. I get it. But think about the postseason, off-season presser after the loss to Denver in the playoffs and how they threw Keon Coleman under the bus, threw the entire offensive coaching staff under the bus that included Joe Brady, and you promote him to head coach after all of this. You just created a mess that I'm not sure you're going to be able to clean up. Good luck in Buffalo. Because I said all of this should have happened in the 2022 AFC divisional round when Cincinnati beat the brakes off of you, and you should have started to clean up then. But you waited, and you held on to hope, thinking what was constant was going to work. But then the exposure took place in the 2022 playoffs when Cincinnati beat you on your turf, and you had two other losses to Kansas City in 23 and 24 the next 2 years, respectively. But you got the division largely because nobody was there. You got that playoff spot because nobody outside of Kansas City and for a moment a Baltimore and a Cincinnati stood out. And this year, everything caught up to you. And the presser to what took place today is the epitome of why your franchise is still a laughingstock. Even though you had success winning division titles and getting to divisional rounds and a couple AFC title game appearances in Kansas City, but that's not good enough anymore. It's going to be interesting where you guys go from here. Case closed. I swear, if you're gonna throw me under the bus, then promote me, I tell you right now to your face, I ain't taking the job. I'm leaving. I'm putting my notice and I'm out. How are you gonna throw me under the bus and then the next week promote me And then, how to explain that? Something weird is going on in Buffalo, and it's not the good kind of weird. Crazy. Now, speaking of Buffalo and Super Bowls, we're going to touch on what took place 35 years ago tonight down at the old Joe Robbie Stadium in Miami, Florida. It was the New York Giants versus the Buffalo Bills. And we talk about this particular game. It was the insane offense led by Jim Kelly of Buffalo with, the receivers, Don Beebe and Andre Reed and James Lofton, the stand-up running back Thurman Thomas, going against the New York Giants led by head coach Bill Parcells and the aforementioned defensive coordinator Bill Belichick. We talk about this particular game. It's the first time a backup quarterback was starting and could be the first one to win it. And you had Jeff Hostetler, who replaced Phil Simms, who was eliminated courtesy of a regular season game against, of all teams, the Buffalo Bills. Think about that for a minute. So we talk going to this game. You had the Buffalo Bills, who were 13-3, had that no-huddle offense going. They were just beating teams all over the place, led the league in scoring of 428 points, taking on the 1990 New York Giants, who were 4 years removed from their first Super Bowl. And Bill Parcells went to the ideology of power football as the season wore on. And, of course, he had the defensive mind of Bill Belichick next to a brilliant mind like Bill Parcells. And that team put together a 14-12-2 record. One of their two losses, ironically, was in Buffalo, losing to 17-13 in the regular season game. But the real story going into this one was, of course, the backup for the Giants, The backup for the Giants, Jeff Hostetler, started for Phil Simms, who basically was injured in that loss to the Bills, ironically enough. And we talk about going into this particular game. One of the real stories was the run by the Giants and their then defensive coordinator, Bill Belichick, where they had 3 games where they had 3 different schemes. This is the third one. The 2 games before against Chicago and San Francisco, they had 2 different defensive schemes. Against Chicago, because of the run game with Neil Anderson, they went to the 4-3, which is something they haven't done, changed it up. Bill Parcells said he did it because we had to take away the run game and try to get the ball so the Bears don't play ball control offense. And they go to San Francisco, who went back-to-back, was going for a 3-peat. Bill Belichick said, we're playing on nickel. And there were some timely calls on that game by Bill Belichick and even Bill Parcells, who said, change it up a bit. That allowed the Giants to stun San Francisco to win the NFC and get to the Super Bowl here. And they were the designated home team with this one, so it was like a pro-Giants crowd for the most part. And the real story with this one, before I get to the real story, the real story, is when you have an offense like the Buffalo Bills coming in, especially after what they did to the Raiders on the tune of 51-3. I mean, it was just an abomination. Granted, Bo Jackson was knocked out and everything fell off the rails. But when you have an offense like that, how do you control it? You go to a clock-killing offense, and that's what the Giants did with Jeff Hostetler and the eventual Super Bowl MVP. I'll touch on this in a minute, Otis Anderson. And they had a drive where it was a 9-minute drive that put them up, still the longest drive in Super Bowl history. Bill Parcells says, we wanted to minimize their possessions, shorten the game, minimize their time of possession. And on offense, that's what they did. And on defense, they basically put all kinds of nickel and dime packages to match up with the speed of the receivers, which, the 3 of James Lofton, Don Beebe, and Andre Reed were as fast as any trio. But to match up with them, knock the balls loose, be physical, take away every route, and not let the receivers beat you, they conceded the run game and let Thurman Thomas do whatever he wants, because Thurman Thomas has had an MVP caliber season for a running back at that point. So that's what the Giants did. And which, of course, led to the 2 famous words nobody in Buffalo wanted to hear. Wide right. down 20-19, a chance to win it. Scott Norwood kicks what turned out to be a potential game-winning 40-plus yard field goal, goes wide right, and for the second time in 5 years, the New York Giants, under Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells, win the Super Bowl. And that was, a sigh of relief. And basically, the fact that kick went wide right, everyone in New York breathed a sigh of relief. And we breathe a sigh of relief in New York, you can feel it across the world because the Giants were the thing in that 1990 season, where basically went wire to wire, start to finish the best team in the league, at least in the NFC. Overall, not record-wise, because San Fran had the number one seed at that point. But just in terms of overall record, the Giants probably wire to wire the best team. But we talk about Scott Norwood and that kick, that was the end. Wide right. It'll forever be his legacy. It'll be forever Buffalo's legacy. Because when you have that moment right there, you can't capitalize on it. It's going to live in infamy. And it'll forever live in infamy for Scott Norwood. Back to the Giants before I touch on the Bills here in a second. We talk about the masterminds of Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick and the defensive schemes they came up with, especially Belichick, during those 3 games against the Bears, the 49ers, and the Bills. You're going to get head coaching opportunities. And, of course, it was shortly after that, Belichick got the head coaching job in Cleveland. Belichick said he got like 3 days afterward. He already had one interview, but had to wait till after the Super Bowl to get the second, and the deal was done. And that's where he got it. And the defensive mind he had for the Giants for the longest time got him that job. And we talk about what happened with them. It was shortly after he got the job, Bill Parcells announced his resignation, said he had heart problems with his heart, having one of his blood vessels blocked near heart attack. But in one of those what-if situations, makes you wonder what if Bill Belichick would have waited till Bill Parcells announced his resignation, because he could have been the guy that took over for Bill Parcells in New York instead of take the job in Cleveland. And because the Giants would tell you they wanted to go back to back, and they had everybody back, and they would likely have gone back to back had Bill Belichick taken over for Bill Parcells, because Bill Belichick had to earn the respect of that defense in New York and earned it. And we have guys like Pepper Johnson, Lawrence Taylor, Carl Banks, Mark Collins, just to name several of them on that roster. Even a guy like Gary Reasons and Harry Carsons. You're going to get that respect. And he had the personnel to have another elite defense like he did during the 2 times he won the Super Bowl in New York. So maybe in revisionist history, you sort of wonder, maybe Bill Belichick sort of was kicking himself simply because he could have had that job in New York, knowing Bill Parcells was going to resign for the health problems he had, which is an interesting history tidbit moving forward. Maybe things would have been different moving on. But at that point, Belichick already took the job at Cleveland. Yes, he had moderate success, got him a couple playoff appearances, got a playoff win against the Bill Parcells-led New England Patriots in 1993. But, of course, the wheels fell off with the move from Cleveland to Baltimore, and that was it for him over there. And for Bill Parcells, many coaching stops in New England, the Jets, and Dallas. Of course, when he went to New England, after Bill Belichick was fired, brought him in as an assistant, the Patriots went to the Super Bowl in 1996, lost to Green Bay. And, of course, the wild scene where he wanted to go back to New York, and the rift between Parcells and Kraft took place, including the famous groceries comment that rubbed Robert Kraft the wrong way. Went to the Jets, took Bill Belichick with him. Odd circumstances that took place there. And, of course, after 99, after 2000, after all kinds of wild legalities, Belichick winds up in New England, and the rest is history for him. Bill Parcells eventually resigns from the Jets, goes to coach of Dallas for a few years, and that's the end for him. Even though he did got the team to a couple winning seasons, he just couldn't deal with what was going on in Dallas and said that was it. So that was the New York Giants' view of things with those two head coaches. If you can put together two brilliant head coaching minds like Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick, you're going to have success. And that's what they had. We talk about the two Super Bowls with the New York Giants. And both would tell you straight up, we're nothing without the other. Watch the documentary, The Two Bills. Bill Belichick said, I learned a lot from Bill Parcells. It was a springboard for everything that happened for me. And Bill Parcells said, what he's did in his career in New England, I saw it in New York. As you can say, one wasn't anything without the other. And I'm sure deep down, they'll both tell you this. And of course, for the Bills, the 4 straight Super Bowls, couldn't win one. This one probably the stinger because that was the closest they got to it. But wide right will forever be infamous when we talk about the Buffalo Bills because it was there. It was there to get it. And exactly what took place on that night. But wide right is always going to be the Bills' legacy. See, we talk about many Super Bowls. And of course, a few years ago, Tyler Bass relived it when he had that kick against Kansas City where he was in more wide right than Scott Norwood's. And I mean, it was more wide right. I mean, so far wide right, I thought it was going to wind up in the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, that kick Tyler Bass had against the Chiefs was so far wide right, I thought it was going to wind up in the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, Scott Norwood's was bad. Tyler Bass was worse. I mean, whenever you miss a kick and you go wide right, expect it to be a Buffalo kicker. That's exactly the legacy of the Buffalo Bills and their kickers moving forward. It started with what took place in Super Bowl 25. I mean, his was bad. Scott Norwood's was bad. But man, the Tyler Bass kick against Kansas City, it was so far wide right, I thought it was going to wind up in the Atlantic Ocean. That's how far wide right that kick was of Tyler Bass against Kansas City. That's what you need to know. But that's a legacy. Lots of great individual players have come through there, and I mean tons. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Bruce Smith, Andre Reed. Even before that, guy like O.J. Simpson, just to name several of them. You have a guy like Doug Flutie come through there. But the overall legacy wasn't always will be wide right. And it happened twice, not just once. With Scott Norwood in Super Bowl 25, probably the most famous one. But Tyler Bass in 3 years ago against the Kansas City Chiefs in the 2023 AFC Divisional was so far wide right, you thought it was going to wind up in the Atlantic Ocean. That's how far wide right that kick was. But karma's coming for the Buffalo Bills for many reasons possible. It's another topic because they can't find a way to get out of their own way. And after the Super Bowl, the 4 Super Bowls, for the longest time, they couldn't get out of their own way. And it continues today. But how do you slow down a high-octane offense? Slow the game down, minimize the time of possession, shorten the game, clock-killing offense, long drives. That's how the New York Giants won Super Bowl 25, 35 years ago today down in Florida. And 2 brilliant coaches, Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick. I mean, one of them made you get stay on a straight and narrow. The other one made sure you stayed on it. That's why those two went well head and head. Amazing. So now that ends the NFL segment. Weird day for the NFL after the news that broke and some of the things I had to talk about today. Thought I'm having more fun talking about Super Bowl 25, but let I know we're talking about Bill Belichick and the cowardice that was the NFL pro football voting procedure. And boy, it was an act of cowardice today. It really was. Now we go to the world of boxing. And 2 nights, one of them were greatness. One greatness was established, and another one, greatness was about to begin. Let's talk about the greatness that was established first. And you talk about this one that took place 72 years ago tonight at the Orange Bowl in Miami. This was the 3rd meeting between Archie Moore and Joey Maxim. It was already 2-0 Moore. You know what happened in the first fight when Moore just found a way to handle Joey Maxim to win the light heavyweight championship at age 39 and hit pay dirt. And they had the second fight where Moore just continued getting a decisive unanimous decision win. So Maxim works his way up to get to this point again. And what we have in this particular fight is another chance for Joey Maxim to find his way back to the top. But also another night to show that Archie Moore shows the world that age was nothing but a number. And boy, that's what we got. And you tell me what took place 72 years ago with the Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida. The story of this one, not much to talk about, is that, I said before, longevity and tactical skill at the highest level because of the longevity was what made Archie Moore great. And you could probably see at age 40, this was quite possibly one of his finest performances. When you talk about what he did on this night, I mean, he just obliterated Joey Maxim from start to finish. I mean, not only did he beat him, he floored him twice, and he just dominated him from start to finish. Like Maxim didn't belong in the same ring as him. And Joey Maxim, an all-time great light heavyweight, just Archie Moore was levels over this, and it showed it here on this night when he won the unanimous decision in over 15 rounds, because he did everything and everything possible to the great Joey Maxim to essentially end this three-fight series 3-0. And really, all three fights, there were three wipeouts. Archie Moore won all three, basically going away. And Joey Maxim was as good as anyone. I mean, he beat Sugar Ray Robinson and had some quality wins along the way. But still, Archie Moore, who fought long and hard for this moment, and when he finally hit the pedestal, took advantage of it, and that's what he did. 72 years ago tonight, actually 2 years before that was when he won the title, when he finally hit the pay dirt at age 39. So here we are. It is at age 40, showing the whole world that he can still get better into his 40s. At a time when people call for your head at that age, Archie Moore defied Father Time. And he was a rare breed during those days. Because in those days, at age 40, they're calling for your head. Archie Moore said, I'm going to prove everybody wrong. And he certainly did. He took the domination of Joey Maxim in the three-fight series going 3-0. What made Archie Moore great? Well, let's start with this. His technical IQ and ring generalship, knows the ring inside out. I mean, that's what made him the old mongoose. I mean, his punching power, over 120 career knockouts. Last thing to go with a fighter at any age is their power, and Archie Moore was a perfect example of it. I mean, resilience, durability. I mean, even in his 40s, his stamina was better than you think. And of course, when he got you hurt, he knew how to finish. And he had Maxim hurt and was going for the finish. Maxim just had good survivor skills. And that's why he managed to survive the distance, but Moore beat him up along the way. Essentially, it was a 15 rounds of nothing shutout. That's what it was. So, and versatility is also what made Archie Moore great. Box, mix it up, sort of a la what Marvin Hagler was. But Archie Moore was a case of a fighter who said greatness due to longevity. He was a case of greatness due to longevity because he was a guy who refined his tools, worked at his craft, and found ways to survive well into his 40s and still fight at that level. And you can say one of three guys who elevated his history, his place in history, by fighting better as he got older and by getting bigger wins as he got older. The only two guys you could probably say that about are George Foreman and Bernard Hopkins, and that's the list. And Archie Moore was the first to do this. Kept going on and on. At times when people call for your head, Archie Moore just defied it and was getting big wins, defending his light heavyweight championship for the longest time until he retired for good at age 48. And defied everything because, A, he still had the power, he still had the punch, and he also had in-ring instincts in ways that no fighter today have. And because those in-ring instincts was one of the last things that went in Archie Moore, that's why he had success deep into his 40s. As he fought deep into his 40s, he managed to elevate his place in history and became a top three, arguably the top light heavyweight in boxing history. And that's why he had the success. And we talk about George Foreman's success into his 40s, reason being Archie Moore was his trainer. I mean, and Moore who knew how to use his craft, implemented his experience onto Foreman, pass it on, and that's why George Foreman had the success in his second career, because it was begun by having the mentorship of the great Archie Moore in his corner. Not only was Archie Moore a great fighter, and also talk about with George Foreman, a heck of a trainer, one of the premier boxing minds the sport ever saw, and he was brilliant, and that brilliance garnered him a lot of success, especially after the age of 40. And we talk about fighters who had success over the age of 40. I mean, it was him, George Foreman, and Bernard Hopkins. That's the list. We talk about elevating history. Those three did it after the age of 40. A couple others might have a little bit, but not to the tune of those three guys. And they will always be the gold standard. We talk about success deep into your 40s at the level those three did it at. And it was 72 years ago tonight, after already beating Joey Maxim twice in the third fight, just doing anything and everything he wanted to do to Joey Maxim at the age of 40 to retain the light heavyweight championship in the middle of that long reign and continue to elevate his history in the light heavyweight division after the age of 40. And no one's going to elevate like that ever again. That's it. The only two I saw were George Foreman and Bernard Hopkins. No one's ever come close. And we talk about Moore's place in history. I mean, I said a top six light heavyweight: Ezra Charles, Billy Conn, Archie Moore, Bob Foster, Michael Spinks, and you probably throw an individual like Harry Greb in there, Gene Tunney, Tiger Flowers, Harold Johnson. Those are some of the great light heavyweights of all time. Archie Moore is probably the elite of that bunch. Some give him the nod over Ezra Charles because Charles never had the championship. But mind you, just like Archie Moore went 3-0 against Joey Maxim, Ezra Charles went 3-0 versus Archie Moore. Though his peak wasn't as great as maybe Moore's at age 40, or even a guy like Billy Conn, it wasn't far behind it, but expanded longer. And the only reason Ezra Charles didn't get a title shot was due to the bad business by Gus Lasinovich. That's the only reason I didn't get it. But that doesn't deter the fact that Archie Moore is a top 3 all-time heavyweight. Some people put him number 2 behind Charles. I don't have a problem with it because of what he did after the age of 40. And to elevate your history after the age of 40 the way he did, I think probably stands out more than some of the young guns who just burst into the scene out of nowhere and just show the world I'm it. Archie Moore showed he's it, but had to earn it the hard way and found a way to be better as his career got longer. And that's why his place in history is one of a kind. May God rest the soul of the great Archie Moore. And we go from continued greatness to the beginning of greatness. And boy, we had a firefight that took place in Puerto Rico over 48 years ago tonight. This was Alfredo Escalera defending his championship against the Nicaraguan Alexis Arguello. Arguello had the long reign as a featherweight champ, and facing Alfredo Escalera in his home country, we are a little more than a year removed from Alfredo Escalera getting that gift decision over Tyrone Everett in a fight that had everyone all over the place. And he did get the decision, but anybody knows the real story of that one. I will go into that one. I have a show on that. I'll replay it later. But after the gift decision he got against Tyrone Everett, he had 2 fights, and actually 3 fights against opponents who had no business fighting for this particular championship. And he started to show the signs of slowing down a bit. So we entered this kid from Nicaragua named El Flaco Explosivo Alexis Arguello, who was in the war-torn country of Nicaragua at this time. And we talk about what took place going to this fight and having to travel because of everything that happened in that country. He had to go to the backyard of one Alfredo Escalera. And the story of this one was going to, it's a case of who had their body parts left, because there were bodies beat up both ways on this night. And the epitome of who Alexis Arguello was probably shown more in this fight under heavy fire and duress, because the difference showed as this fight wore on. We talk about accuracy and efficiency in all sports. You probably won't see the numbers in the boxing field, but you have to watch the fight to see it. And Alexis Arguello showed it in this fight, as he was getting everything that he can handle and then some from Alfredo Escalera, probably who was his last great performance at that level. But the accuracy of Alexis Arguello showed early when he had the early knockdown, especially we talk about the short-lived hook that he knows how to put you down with, and that's what he did early on against Escalera. But every time he hit Escalera would try to fight back. And boy, little did we know Escalera was going to force Arguello, known as a calm technician, to step up the aggression, and that's what happened. And boy, did we have a firefight that took place in Puerto Rico in the backyard of Escalera. And Escalera, because of his home country, feeling was he was going to get the hometown decision, end quote, and to force Arguello to be aggressive. And as this fight was going on, the economy of punches of Alexis Arguello, which has been a strong suit, started to add up big time on Alfredo Escalera, because Alfredo Escalera's parts were breaking and falling apart. I mean, you're talking about cuts all over the place. You're talking about an eye injury in the middle of it. You're talking about a hand injury in the middle of it, a jaw injury in the middle of it. And even though Alfredo Escalera probably showed the biggest heart he had in quite some time, he was taking a malicious beating, and the beating started to show as the fight was going on into the later rounds. And we talk about what happened in the later rounds as this fight was coming on. We talk about the economy of punches of a heavy-handed fighter in those weight classes like Alexis Arguello. They might not weigh in the first 2 or 3 rounds. When it goes to rounds 9 and 10, that's when they start to tell. And it really started to tell as Escalera was starting to get beating. And even though in rounds 10 and 11, Escalera was hurt, he managed to find a way to hurt Alexis Arguello himself, and a case of rock'em sock'em robots in the super featherweight division, and that's what we had. But at that point, in rounds 12 and 13, Alfredo Escalera emptied the gas tank, and Alexis Arguello capitalized, started to give him a real beating, and Alfredo Escalera was a bloody and swollen mask with a boatload of injuries. And at that point, the barrage was just too much, and Arthur Mercante Sr. stopped the fight. And the winner of your second world championship in the super featherweight division was none other than Alexis El Flaco Explosivo Arguello to win his second world title. And a fight of the year of 1978 where both guys just beat each other to where the gas tanks were empty and there was nothing left in the blood of Alfredo Escalera. And if you want to fight, you want to see a lot of blood, watch this one. Because it was a case of skill and will. And even though Alfredo Escalera has will, and he had skill also, but when you have economical skill at the level that Alexis Arguello had, and you can just find ways to sharpshoot an aggressive fighter the caliber of Alfredo Escalera, you're going to solve him, and you're going to eventually break him down. And that's what he did to Escalera on this night to win the super featherweight championship. And Alexis Arguello would turn to begin his march to greatness, and he really started to elevate himself, needing a second world title at a time when winning multiple world titles in multiple divisions was significant. He started to put himself in that, really started to establish himself, because it was at that point his career started to really take off. We moved forward, having to make 6 more successful title defenses, including a rematch against Escalera where he just beat what was left of him, and beating guys like Bobby Chacon, Bazooka Limon, and Ruben Castillo. But when we talk about the beautiful fighter, Alexis Arguello was it. every single which way possible. You wanted to watch him because when you talk about the definition of the sweet science, that was Alexis Arguello. And that's what he did to Alfredo Escalera on this night. Rough, brutal, but beautiful because of the accuracy of Alexis Arguello that gradually slowed down, broke down, and took out the tough Alfredo Escalera to win the super featherweight championship. Of course, eventually later on, he would win the lightweight championship to be one of the first 12 to win world titles in 3 weight classes. And at a time when 3 weight division titles was of significance, Alexis Arguello also did that. And that the catapult really began, that took place 48 years ago in Bayamon, Puerto Rico, when Arguello beat Alfredo Escalera, and a premier south of the lightweight division all-time great. They talk about the great little giants and the great Latino greats. On there's Alexis Arguello, and he's high up there. And it started on this night when he won a 2nd world title. Because back then, you're winning multiple world titles in multiple weight classes. You start to really establish your legacy. It's not like today we can win any title. Back then, when it had any kind of credibility, you was the man. And when Alexis Arguello handled Alfredo Escalera and won a 2nd world title, he began his march to greatness. And pure greatness and a thing of beauty to the likes we haven't seen since. It probably will never see ever again. And that's what made Alexis Arguello one of a kind. Poetry, emotion, beauty, class, charm, also brutality, and menacing in the same sentence was Alexis Arguello every time he fought, and that's what made him great. And he can match up with anybody in any era because his accuracy was through the roof. Because when he threw, he landed. And whoever he hit you with and he landed on you, he was doing massive damage. That's what he did to Alfredo Escalera. That's what he did to many fighters, especially the 1-round knockout of Kevin Rooney, where Kevin Rooney is still seeing stars many years later. That is Alexis Arguello in a nutshell. Just a terrific fighter. Of course, had many great wins, many great fights. Bazooka Lamone, Bobby Chacon, Ray Boom Boom Mancini, and of course the 2 with Aaron Pryor. Even though he lost both, still show the whole world why he was a warrior. And when we talk about the Latino greats, in the upper echelon of Latino greats, everyone's going to point to Roberto Duran as number 1, and rightfully so. I mean, all signs point to it. Not far behind him is Alexis Arguello. Maybe he's close, but still far, but closer than you think, because his legacy and how he got to that point was just as impressive as what Roberto Duran did at lightweight. I mean, it was overshadowed because Duran was the fighter of the decade in those weight classes, and understandably so. But Alexis Arguello, toe-to-toe, tried the best he can to match the legacy of Duran by winning 2 world titles in the 70s. And that's what made him great. I mean, still not over Duran, but was as great as Duran, probably greater than most Latino fighters. And it's almost as if he's underrated today because we talk about the all-time greats and lace him up in the Latino community. Sometimes I feel like he's overlooked and almost devalued given the era he came in. We talk about the 70s, because the 70s was Roberto Duran's era, understandably so. But his run was just as impressive as Duran's, and he deserves credit for it. And that's why his place in boxing history, especially in Latino boxing history, is high up there. You could probably say pound for pound overall, top 25 to top 30 all time, because of the accolades and the accomplishments he had during his time. A genuine all-time great with poetry, emotion, class, charm, accuracy, brutality, and menacing aggressiveness all in the same sentence. And we put it all together, it was the beauty of El Flaco Explosivo, Alexis Arguello. May God rest the soul of the great Alexis Arguello. And on that note, that'll wrap up this edition of All Era Sports with Sirhan. I will be back tomorrow night. As always, if you missed this show or any others in the past, you can catch them on the Apple Podcast, the iHeartRadio, and the Spotify apps. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. Always take care of yourself first. Always respect other people's boundaries. And always stop. Do not let people walk on your boundaries. You do all that, everything good will come your way. Once you let people walk on your boundaries or step over your boundaries and disrespect you, nothing else matters. Always set healthy, strong boundaries to where nobody can come to you. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless, and I will see you tomorrow.